that day was abysmal. It was probably the following week where we started to implement like shipping. I guess maybe it was that first Wednesday. I don't know. It was the first time that I got to see Django openly crying, which was beautiful.
We just kind of traded. We one of us would go in the back, the other one would cover the front. Like it was a rough day.
Yeah, it was like,
doubt.
when the trip starts to go bad on acid, and we kept looking at each other and being like, is this gonna be forever? And he'd be like, no, it's not gonna be forever. Right? And then I'd be like, okay, we got this. And he'd be like, we can't do this forever. It was just this.
And like that.
Hello, and welcome to Comic Industry Insiders. I already fumbled it. My name is Adam Freeman, and this is a weekly podcast where we talk to the movers and shakers of the comic book industry and try and tease out the tricks, the tips, the habits, the things that will make them special and make them who they are, and guide our industry. We do all of this so that you can learn something for your business or your career in comics. My guests this week are like a comedy duo if they actually figured out how to make a business work. We're multiple at this point, right? Django Bohren and Jeff Figley. I think I got that right. Man, I'm not used to saying your last name. They not only do they run the Comics Place in Bellingham, Washington, but they also have their own POS system called Comic Shop Assistant that has been, slowly percolating in the background, obviously going to become a mover and shaker of its own inside of our industry for a while now. We've all been watching it with bated breath. I can't wait to dig more into that and learn more about it, and to learn more about these two because they've just been fun to watch in the background. So here we are in the forefront for literally dozens of people. Django and Jeff, how are you boys?
Doing well,
Great.
Adam. Thanks for having us. Django, thanks for joining us this week.
Yeah, it's good to see you, Jeff.
Yeah,
Oh,
bud.
you too, Adam.
I know. Look at us. We were just discussing, the three of us together with our headphones, and I'm not wearing glasses, but there is just like three of a kind for incredibly handsome white guys, right? I mean,
Clearly, you three work in comic books. Clearly. Those beards, spectacles, and headphones scream comic book boys to me.
Oh, this must be the Comic Book Boys show.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome to it. All right, so I actually had a couple questions prepared specifically for you two. And Jeff, the one that I think jumps out at me first that I wanted to talk to you about is, can you tell me about your best friend, Bear? Because I hear you're like BJ McKay in that you have a best friend, Bear. Is that right?
Yeah, I do. I am. I have actually 7 of them. 5 of the exact same bear. A couple other various Target-produced incarnations of it. Target, Pillow Fort did a small run of these stuffed bears. My wife and I went to Target, saw one, and immediately started talking in a fake voice for him. And now we have 5 of them. They all have different names and different personalities. I just recently acquired one from eBay. Cost $150, but it's like 2.5 feet long. And the tricky thing, the stuffy himself was like $50, but it was like $75 to ship a long bear. So we call him Cousin Bear. But yes,
Cousin Bear.
The bears, yeah.
You know what's really interesting is that I think you just gave the exact same story as Triumph the Insult Comedy Dog.
Oh, yeah.
That is the origin story. He is out with his wife, and they come across these puppets, and so he starts doing voices, and she just cracks up at that one, and that becomes the sensation.
I was just watching an interview with that comedian. I forget the name of the guy who did it, but he was on Conan recently. Yes,
yeah.
Triumph the Comic Insult Dog. Very good. Very good.
Well, I think it actually got his start on Conan.
Yeah.
Way back in
Robert Smigel.
Robert
That's right.
Smigel.
Now we just
Well
need to introduce
done.
Jeff to Conan.
Oh,
He and I hang out.
yeah.
We're both
yeah?
tall. Yeah.
I get you. All right, well, let's talk about early days, and then hopefully maybe Bear can jump in and answer a question. At some point.
Yeah.
I think that would be
Okay,
excellent.
yeah.
Like if he just comes in, like if he's around, you know what I mean?
He's hard to keep control of, but yeah, he's probably going to meander in.
I feel that. All of the best people are. You don't want to try and hem him in.
Exactly.
Tell me about this meeting, because you two. I mean, I'm going to give you the God's honest truth. There's a certain ambiguity about the relationship between the two of you that I wasn't real sure I had dialed in. I didn't know if this was romantic. It might be.
It is. It definitely
I've met people who, you guys present in the same way that they do, and they have a romantic partnership.
Yeah.
But it's like it seems almost not unlikely once we get to know you two, but like it's not a common dynamic inside of our industry for two people to be so well suited and both so forward. Usually you'll see one person who's a bit more outspoken and another person who can, just is kind of their backup. But you two both seem to be capable of stepping into limelight. I'm curious to know how this began. Like, what's the origin story here?
Lot of encouragement from Django coming my way. Yeah, I mean, I've been at the shop like 12 years now, and only in the last like 3 or 4 have I been particularly willing to talk to people outside of the comic shop or this small room I'm in now. So a lot of me being anywhere has been Django being like, you deserve to be here as much as anybody, bud. You got a lot of wisdom. You've been doing this longer than a lot of folks. So never sell the importance of a hype man. And Django is certainly my hype man, and I try to return that as often as I can.
So he's your Flavor Flav, right? He's just right there behind you, pushing you forward.
With a mic.
That's awesome.
Knows a lot of my words, yells them. But as far as our working relationship go, I did the classic, like, graduated from college. I was like, I've been working my whole life. I'm going to get a part-time job at a comic shop for like 6 months or a year before I go to grad school. And then the owner of the shop that I was working at and managing got very sick. Around that time, my appetite for things that I wanted to do with the store kind of outgrew my coworkers and the owner at the time. And Django had been a customer at the store for many years, had owned a business in town that he had closed not terribly long before I had started working at the comic shop.
Adam, it was a whoopee cushion business.
I tried to be whoopee cushions basically.
I want to take a pause there,
yes.
Jeff's story, because I haven't heard this. You ran a novelty shop. Is that how that I would refer to this? I mean, I'm expecting those old ads in the backs of comics, you have the whoopee cushion and you have the
sea monkeys,
bad taste sea monkeys, bad tasting gum, the gum that snaps you in the finger, all of that.
Still got all of that.
Yeah.
Really?
I cleared it out of my garage and brought a bunch of it into the shop when I got on board. I had a shop called Merchbot in downtown Bellingham for maybe 6 or 7 years. It's hard to make a living on $1.50 whoopee cushions and $15 t-shirts, especially when a recession hits and you're in the middle of a divorce and everything kind of broke down at once. So
you're like lusting far away after like a comic shop employee that's 12 years younger than you. I can't imagine the sort of angst and confusion you were in at that point of your life, right?
Look at that Jeff guy over there. He's got it all together.
He's kind of a horsey looking fella. Yeah.
So when is this? Put this into perspective for me. When is this whole conflict happening for you?
14 or 15?
Okay.
Yeah, I think I started at the shop at like 2012.
Yeah.
All right. So wait, when is the novelty shop? Do you have both open at the same time?
Yeah, there was some overlap. Jeff was working at the shop while I had the novelty store.
Yeah.
Oh, I got you.
But we didn't really start talking until I'd closed the store.
I got you.
Yeah, and I don't remember what year we opened that store, but it was 6 or 7 years of super fun, irreverent times and $250 sales days.
I'll never forget the moment that Django won my heart. Though he was at the shop, it was our second location because I had convinced the previous owner to move to a slightly more central location. And like I had said, I was really excited about trying to prove that comic shops you could make a living by owning a comic shop. Like I was intending to be there part-time and then leave to go to grad school. But one thing in my mind I wanted to prove to myself and people was that you can own a comic shop and that can be an actual safe business model, because I grew up loving comics. My dad was a big comic guy. But Django came in the shop one day, and I had been like rearranging stuff, and I had gotten a bunch of like bundles made and used paperbacks put on a bookshelf, and they were all kind of like spined and everything. And Django and I had talked a couple times, and he came in and he was just like, you should try and like face some of those out. And that's a pretty small statement, but to me it indicated that like, oh, he's thinking about sales, he's thinking about the way things are represented and the way that people interact with them. And then like shortly after that we had a conversation of like, we should price our game stuff at 95 instead of 99 because it plays like a slight psychological trick. Psychology had been my undergraduate degree. So like that day I did exactly what he said, and it helped sell those things on that shelf. And that's a pretty small thing, but in my world at the time it represented somebody thinking about something in a way I respected, and respect is very hard for me to come by. Yeah.
So you had you were working on you had a psych undergrad degree. Did you ever make it to get your master's? Is that what you were heading towards?
No. I've been stressing Django out with the possibility of that pursuit for the last like 5 or 6 years.
Right, because you guys don't have enough going on, right? Because you need to go back.
Yeah.
I completely get that. You don't want to get bored.
Exactly.
You know. Oh, my goodness. So, I mean, I do find that to be an interesting place to come from, in that marketing and merchandising, like you're talking about, and so much of that is really psychologically based. It's about understanding how the frog is going to jump so you can be there to catch it, right? Mm-hmm. Have you continued to see that in your work, or is that like he just said basically you're wasting your life. You should be in comics retail. Why would you want to make people's lives better and make them intellectually, emotionally more healthy? What the hell?
Yeah, I have grown up my whole life wanting to be in bands and play music, and one of the things that I've always loved about that idea is the sort of band against the world mentality that comes with like believing in something and wanting to put it in the world, and in order for it to succeed you have to believe in each other and kind of say F you guys to the audience.
Right.
And working with Django is the closest I've ever felt to that. So it didn't take a lot of like sales pitching or anything. It was just like kind of from right off the bat, it was like, what's some crazy shit we could do? And yeah, I love coming up with ideas. Django's great at plucking them down from the fifth dimensional realm into our third dimensional, reality, and putting physical basis behind them. So, that's the reason I stick around.
I know that Brian. Oh, I'm blanking on Brian's name.
Garside.
Brian Garside. Thank God.
I picked the right one out of 400 comic book Brians.
Great job, Django. Brian Garside. I've done one of our interviews with him. He should be 2-3 weeks from now that we're posting. But he talks a lot about how he is a starter, and Django specifically, you're what he calls a finisher, right?
Absolutely.
And this, by the way, this idea has stuck with me so much. I have somebody on my team, Anthony Militano, who is so full of amazing ideas, but like he has a hard time jumping out there. Like the risk of taking that first step is too much for him. But man, I can rely on him to make sure that like I don't, as I'm like chasing off the next shiny thing, he's going to be there going, well, we don't forget we have to handle, still got to be orders made. We still got to pay people, all that stuff. So yeah,
that working relationship goes through all sorts of mediums and all sorts of things, and I admire it. I kind of boil it down to like the Stan Lee Jack Kirby dynamic, or like I don't know, John Lennon Paul McCartney. But there's oftentimes kind of somebody that is working quiet in the background and like we got to finish this, and then you got to have somebody who's amazing at coming up with ideas and actually realizing them. Django and I approach everything from opposite ends and then run our heads into each other.
It's really funny because I think Django, if you're just looking from the outside in, you almost seem like somebody who wants to start things. I have a list here of websites that you have attached to yourself.
I hope it's not a complete list.
I doubt it is. Listen, you do not want to look at my GoDaddy list. It is embarrassingly long. I don't know why. I don't collect anything but URLs now.
Yeah.
ohgodmyeyes.com, theexcuse.com, fistofblog.com, Django Bohren,
That's dead.
.com. That's good.
Yep.
Most of these are, by the way.
Yeah.
Most of these are blank pages. Rainbows and Unicorns, Seat Hole. Yeah.
Rainbows and Unicorns is amazing. That's still around. That's how to field dress a unicorn, actually.
Right. Because
Practical.
someday, if you need it, you want to be able to search, you want to be able to Google and find the page. So because, I mean, you're not prepared when you see a unicorn. You take down a unicorn. Nobody has that ready to go.
What do you do next? How do you get the mystical tuber?
The internet doesn't exist just so that you can kind of know how to do some things. The internet exists so you definitely know how to do all of it.
All of it in the moment you need it.
Yep,
and then
100%.
Probably not, 5 minutes later. We have legitimately systematized the ability to only study for the test.
Exactly.
Right? That's all the internet is. That's
great.
exactly right. I get it.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about, so we're talking about this. Is there another secret sauce to this dynamic that makes you guys you've been incredibly effective, right? The Comics Place has essentially given you a platform to do other things. We're going to talk a bit about Comic Shop Assistant, which I'm really excited to dig into. What is this kind of secret sauce behind you two? Is it just that starter finisher dynamic, or is there more?
I mean, I think a lot of it just comes from both of us being willing to listen to each other and to be wrong, and to collaborate to find the best move forward. I do a lot of things by brute force and just sit there and do it and do it and do it. And Jeff has, I think, a different way of approaching problems and approaching people. And, I tend to be a lot more blunt and upfront and robotic, and Jeff tends to feel feelings. Is that the words, Jeff?
Yeah, both of my parents were school psychologists, and I went to school for psychology and just people and thinking about people and their feelings and empathy and all that is just sort of been tied to my DNA. But like Django said, I can't remember the first time I came to Django angrily and started crying. But there have been a handful. I'm not sure if you've read the Steve Jobs biography, but that man cried a lot when he was upset. But I remember learning that I could be upset and I could vulnerably bring issues to Django, and he would listen to them and not be defensive and argumentative. It was the first time somebody outside of my family would listen to me and want the best for both of us leaving that interaction. And so for somebody I associate with the word ego a little bit, Django, he's able to dissolve that ego in important moments. And, I'm somebody who's a bit of a people pleaser and wants everyone to be okay. And the last person I'll worry about is myself. And it's important in those situations to be surrounded by people who can identify that within you. And he's very good at giving me the space to express the bad thoughts and not make me feel shitty about it for 2 weeks afterwards.
Right.
We're both very, very different. And I think the real secret sauce is just respecting those differences and not trying to fix the other person, but try to help them. If that makes sense.
Oh, that makes all the sense. You say that, and that I got a little shiver, because there are relationships in my life that I realize now, looking back, maybe didn't work because I was, I either felt like they were trying to make me into something, or there was something about them that made me want to make them into something. That doesn't, it's never going to work. Right. That's wonderful. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
All right.
A lot of trust and faith.
That's
all right. Well,
the other
that's
part.
Enough about feelings.
Yeah. Let's talk about some codes, zeros and ones, boys.
I don't know. I feel like we gotta talk about sports or something here for a minute.
I got that.
I do not. I'm not. I was literally talking a big game there. But no, let's talk about the two of you, the things that you've built, right? First, let's talk about the Comic Place. Bellingham, Washington. Did I get that? I'm just from memory. All right.
Yep.
Great.
Yeah.
Django, this comes out of you come from a place of retail, and you decide you're going to build a comic shop, I guess.
Not even that. We inherited the shop.
Oh, what?
It was It was started, as far as we can tell, in 1982. That's what the signage says, but I think there was some weird stuff that happened off the books before then. And we are, I think, the 6th and 7th owners, or 5th and 6th owners, or something of the place.
Yeah.
So
is this like some sort of like squatters comic book
yeah.
shop?
Yeah,
where you
yeah.
just like,
First one there, longest one there gets it. Yeah.
yeah,
what?
No.
yeah, it was, yeah.
We're all like 4th or 5th generations, though. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is insane. Well, I mean, I spent some time as a retailer, and I bought it from someone, and then, my ex-wife got it when we split up, and then she sold it to someone, and it went through like 4 or 5 owners.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of
that
comics.
happens.
That's
comics.
part of this game in a lot of places. But like when we inherited it had just moved into a larger street level location from I guess the other place was maybe 1,000 square feet up in an attic somewhere.
Yeah. I had pushed Art to move us downstairs, and that easily doubled the space, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Easily doubled the space, but it was a really bummer of a building. Like the shelves would kind of lean in and come say hi when you walk by them.
It had been a board game store in town for like 30 years or something, but the owner was growing weed upstairs in it, so he refused to let any maintenance people come in ever. So then that person just kind of got sick and I don't know,
retired.
Retired, but we got it, and it was very clear. They're like, okay, so like he's got jugs of water everywhere to catch the water because he's not letting maintenance people. All right, cool. Which is like, I think the final straw was one night I was there closing, and I was getting ready to like turn the lights off, and I went over to the light switch, and water was gushing out of it.
Oh my God.
Gushing out of the plastic fixture that the light switches were in. And I was like, I'm not very good at a lot of stuff, but I know those two things don't go well together.
Maybe water and next to the white light switch.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the real important question here, though, is how was the weed? Was it?
Buddy,
was it worth it?
I don't know him, and I never got his crop, but let's just say I've picked up in his stead. And Comics Place has always got a special little room,
I got you. But with better electrical and,
and what they're doing with LED lighting now. Yeah.
Oh, hello.
Yeah.
So like when we took over, we didn't know how much money we were making or losing because things were just in complete disarray. Like the previous owner got sick and was not able to communicate pretty quickly. So we discovered that we were losing about $2,000 a month eventually.
Very good.
And I think it took us, I was in the middle of active bankruptcy at the time because of the novelty store. And there was just like no safety net. And we borrowed maybe $8,000 from the previous owner's widow. And within about 6 months, we were breaking even and paying her back.
Awesome.
There was a lot of, low hanging fruit, easy things to attack and tweak. We had just moved from having no point of sale, just a cash register, without even tracking categories. Even we had just installed Moby so that we could track what we were selling and reorder things in a better way, and just all that stuff that an old school comic store doesn't necessarily need until they really need it.
Or don't know they need it until they get it and they go, what were we doing before?
Exactly that.
Exactly. And so then we moved to a larger location, and that's where we are right now.
So I mean, you guys are doing POS. How many old school retailers are you talking to now who are like, I'm fine, I've got cycle sheets, I'm good?
A lot.
Yeah.
Which, when I had
remarkable.
brought Django on, is how I was feeling. And the previous owner is the one who had like done the research on Moby and kind of purchased a license for it or done it, but Django was like, no, I really believe in inventory. And I was like, that sounds boring, and don't put constraints on me or else I can't flourish. And now, like, I
am
get,
an artist.
Yeah, exactly. So I get where the people who don't have one are coming from. I really do. And I can't even express how much easier it's made my life having inventory and a point of sale system. But
I have no doubt. All right, so so at what point? So you have Moby, right? And Moby was this system for those a half dozen of you who actually watch this show and don't know what that is. Point of sale system also developed by another comic book retailer who happened to be a lawyer and eventually decided that comic book retail actually doesn't make any money, and I'm going to go do something that will. And, oh, yeah, by the way, if you bought no Moby, I know I said I was going to take care of you, but So you guys all kind of took care of each other for a while, right? There was this sort of network of Moby users that you were supporting.
Yeah, and there really still is. Like, there's a pretty active Facebook group. Moby was created before the pandemic, obviously, and before distribution fractured. So that presented a lot of challenges for Moby users.
I have no doubt.
Yeah,
I have no doubt.
But, yeah, we've all been kind of trading tricks and helping each other restore databases. And
Django is still actively volunteering a pretty huge amount of work and time supporting the Moby group with information and data right now. So, that kindness, you can't turn it off, Django.
I don't know. I'm turning it off in June.
Yeah, you're right. There's a switch
June's the
you can
last
just
month
turn
I'm
off.
making those files. So.
Yeah.
Oh, so you've been maintaining the data for those guys this whole time?
Yeah. So when the pandemic happened and DC left Diamond, Moby stopped being able to play nice with those files. So we needed for our store a way to ingest the DC monthly catalogs and the weekly FOC orders.
Right.
So I kind of hacked a way together that worked and started sharing those with all of those other Moby users. And, at this point with DC and with Penguin, Lunar, Penguin, Diamond, only one of those works with Moby natively. So we've been kind of cobbling together these files and doing a lot of the work that the creator of Moby, Ben, used to do.
Yeah.
That it would probably work okay for those users if it wasn't done, but I think it would cause, hundreds of store hours in work for the few things that would fall apart. So
it is an interesting, I at one point was selling another POS system for comic shops, and I found it to be really interesting that there were so many. I mean, not so many. There are many retailers, Moby users specifically, who went from not having a POS system and saying, "I'm fine, I have cycle sheets, I'm good," to getting a POS system, Moby, and saying, "Oh, this is incredible! I have actual view into the data, and I'm actually, saving money, and I'm actually making more in sales." But the leap from that place of I'm going to buy this system and own it outright to I'm going to buy a system that is constantly being updated and a system that is constantly being thought about and is somebody else is thinking about the data, that was too big a leap for them. I always found that to be really an interesting psychological tick, I think.
I mean, I think the big thing about that is that they hadn't seen why they would need something that was being maintained because comics were so static for so long. So as soon as Moby broke, I think everybody realized if we'd been paying Ben a monthly fee, this would be something he would have taken care of within a cycle or two, and not having that, I don't know if he would have stopped doing it if he was getting paid a monthly fee, but I know that getting paid $800 once doesn't sound super cool.
Enticing for upkeep.
Fix things.
Right.
Once in a while.
I mean, there's a reason the world has moved to software as a service, is that our needs change, right?
Yeah.
Also, COVID did change a number of stores and then, suddenly realized, oh, maybe I should offer mail order or, maybe it is, useful for my customers to be able to maintain their own pull sheets, right? Those kinds of things. Yeah. So, I can see that now that you point that out. So, all right. So you are now in this particular timeline, you two have you've stabilized this institution, the place of comics, right? And your Moby users, this bromance is budding, and you've at some point you decide, all right, maybe we need to move on from Moby. Which one of you has programming experience? Why is this?
It is not me, Adam.
No?
Shocker, right?
The musician with the psych degree? You're not the code monkey?
Yeah.
Crazy.
It is Django. We had paid to unlock Moby, which Ben was offering for folks to get under the hood and kind of play with the code and see how it works and stuff. So we had done that for a while, but when the pandemic happened, we needed to be able to sell things online, Django had recently been experimenting with Shopify and kind of building a website to sell things online.
Dude, not recently.
Yeah.
2 days before
Yeah.
we realized we had to lock down, I was like, oh, this looks like a fun evening project. And
Yeah.
I accidentally imported all of our products into Shopify. And then 2 days later, we had to lock down. It was bonkers.
That is bonkers. Were you able to, like, I mean, from that 2 days later, when were you able to flip the switch and start selling? Were you
that day? We decided. Was it on a Wednesday morning that we were like, dude, we can't open the doors. We were already in there, ready to go.
It was like 10 o'clock on a Wednesday, right when we were about to open, and at that point each day you were like, each institution is closing down. So that day it was like, oh, the world is shutting down. We should probably shut this bean down. So we did, and then that day, people were buying things through Shopify, and we would walk out, or not even through Shopify, we would walk out with, like, their file of books through the door, and they'd give us their card, and we'd run back inside and, scan it or whatever. That day was abysmal. It was probably the following week where we started to implement, like, shipping. I guess maybe it was that first Wednesday. I don't know. It was the first time that I got to see Django openly crying, which was beautiful.
We just kind of traded. We one of us would go in the back, the other one would cover the front. Like it was a rough day.
Yeah, it was like,
doubt.
when the trip starts to go bad on acid, and we kept looking at each other and being like, is this gonna be forever? And he'd be like, no, it's not gonna be forever. Right? And then I'd be like, okay, we got this. And he'd be like, we can't do this forever. It was just this.
And like a big hard part about that day was that I had just done this thing without Jeff. Like I built the website without Jeff. I had the whole picture in my head. Yeah. And so when we locked down, I was like, oh, we can just use Shopify. I knew everything, where everything needed to connect. And Jeff was totally lost in it. And I just had, like, I was just barking instructions at him, which is not our dynamic.
It's not.
Right.
And so, like, after that day, I think maybe even later that night or first thing the next morning, I was like, all right, man, let's sit down and I'll show you how this connects to this, connects to this, connects to this. And like the second day was a lot better. But that first day I was like, well, this all has to get done and it has to get done this way. And I'm just going to tell my peer as if he's a child what he has to do next over and over and over.
And that's where the buddy thing comes in, because I don't think most people love being talked to that way. But there is, throughout our 10 years together, we're good at stepping back when we realize the other person has an idea or a vision or momentum or something. So both of us do that really effectively, I think.
Was that the closest you two have gotten to like a real conflict, a split, fissure?
That would have been like a month and a half ago.
That feels real specific. Yeah.
I don't think anything has ever felt close to a fissure. I don't feel like there's ever been a moment where the two of us were like, I don't know if this is gonna work. Yeah,
I think we both are ready to yield when it's important to the other person.
Right.
Like there's our relationship and business and everything is more important than being right or steamrolling the other one when it's not the appropriate time to do it.
If you two are in a conflict, I don't know. I honestly did not realize when we started this conversation now what the theme of this was going to be. And now it's obvious to me that the theme is the way you two work together, because it's fascinating. But you two are in conflict, right? Let's say there's something you have a disagreement on. I'm sure it just happens so rarely. You two have some sort of Vulcan, you have some sort of mind meld. But it's 50-50, right? It's not even 51-49 where you're certain you're right and the other person's wrong. Right? It's 50-50 for both of you. Who's most likely to be trusted in that? Like, who decides? How does the tiebreaker happen?
It depends on the topic, man.
Yeah.
Yeah?
If it's related to technology and computers and systems, like behind the counter stuff, I have no problem speaking my mind, but I mean, an active principle I think we both have is like, when one of the two of us believes in an idea more than the other person, I think we let that person steer it. If it comes to people,
that's Jeff.
Hiring, kind of community stuff, even like to the point of kind of thinking about orders, I think Django very willingly just defers that to me. So we do have these just sort of partitioned, neither one of us is afraid to talk about, like Django every like 5 or 6 months will be like, I really think we need to cut down on like Marvel like number 3s. We've got way too many of those. And then like 6 months will go by and he'll be like, I really think we should make sure like Marvel number 3s are matching 1 and 2. Like,
and it's like I thought of it for the first time, both times.
Yeah. So like we get in. I'll be like, Django, this code thing's not working, and several problems are all having this same type of variable, so that's probably related. And he'll be like, yeah, no, they're very separate ones, but good, like nice one, nice try. We just
it's so cute how you thought you knew the answer there.
Yeah,
that
exactly
was
right.
yeah.
With no coding experience, bud. Yeah, nice work.
It's interesting you talk about staffing specifically. I will tell you, so these two, for the audience, these two have a third, which is the strangest dynamic in all of comics. You two are wonderful together, but the fact that you are essentially partnering with one of your competitors to do seemingly everything, but specifically this podcast called Data Bros, and which is really just an entirely, it's a whole weekly thing for them to promote apple juice, apparently.
Nobody saw that coming, did they?
Nobody really. It snuck up on me, and yet here I am buying more apple juice.
Somehow around episode 100 of our original podcast, that whole thing came to light. We're like 350 episodes in on our normal podcast, so like it's just been around for years, but...
The apple juice thing has
been? Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
It just really just hit my my personal, and then this last week I think you guys must have needed a filler episode, so it was just an update, like
all juice all the time,
all the time. How did that? All right, let's talk about juice then, just for a moment, because I don't want to dig too deep into this. But did that just you just guys wanted to create a fictional sponsor?
Man, we were doing our 100th episode of our weekly podcast about comics, so it's at this point it's called Comics Place Presents Perfectly Acceptable Podcast. And I think that just at some point in the middle of the thing I was like, oh, let's pretend we have a sponsor, and just started talking about a sponsor. Murphy's Apple Juice.
Before recording it, going into it, we were like, we should make up some sponsors.
Right.
And a huge part of most things that Django and I do together involves like improv based comedy, or not comedy, but like problem solving at the comic shop. But we do a ton of like yes-anding and just building fictions, and we love it. We had a third person on the podcast at that point named Justin. I don't remember who came up with Murphy's Apple Juice or what, but that night Django went home and built a website for it. And Django does...
Because we had given a URL.
Yeah. Yep. Django does a lot of very funny things. He does a lot of things, I'm honest with him, are, don't make the cut. He built this website, and the tone of this website is this, like, the most beautiful, like, angry advertiser who is, for some reason, starting at a spot of defensiveness in approaching their product.
And assuming you know the history of why he's a little grumpy.
Yeah, and built this website with his voice throughout the whole thing, and we were just like, well, this is too good to not come back to. So that was, that was probably around the time Trump got elected.
Yeah.
I'm gonna need to dig back into the deep ones, because I really have only listened to Data Bros, and one of the things that caught me was that, and I was immediately struck by how much it reminded me of. I grew up listening to Prairie Home Companion a lot, and they had those sort of the sponsorships were always always
Dewey, Cheatham,
written.
and Howe.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, well, wonderful. Now I'm trying to remember that was a digression on a digression.
Well, Brian's great.
Brian Garside is one of the most natural fits for our partnership, Django and I, that we've ever encountered in comics. Like the first time we got to be with him in person, it was just like, okay, cool. We've been hanging out for a decade. Now you're here. Like he's a special guy.
I can say that I met Brian after my experience in involvement in another POS system, and just his I don't want to say it's just his Canadianness, of, but it's just such a genuine, like, just kind of sweetness that comes off of him.
Yeah.
That even when you're in sort of a conflict, place where you don't, he's like, whatever.
Yeah.
He's fine with it. That's okay. He's such a wonderful energy that comes off of him.
Yeah.
But yes, I'm going to remember in a minute, probably when I listen back to this episode, where I feel like there was a digression of a digression of a digression that ended there. But okay, but let's go back. So
yeah,
we're in the middle of the pandemic. You are trying to figure out how to run a shop without opening your doors.
Mm-hmm.
Django here has been, so prescient as to put you guys online, which many people were not. Where at what point does it get to a place where you're like, not only is this working, but this could work for other people? Because that's a big leap from what you guys just described, right?
So, yes, it is. We were doing deliveries through the store, selling online for 2 years, just Django and I out, like several days a week in our cars. It was probably like a third of the way through the pandemic, halfway through the pandemic, where Django was like, if you give me a chunk of time, I think I can build this thing for us.
The problem we were having was that people would buy something on Shopify, and then in order to maintain their subscriptions, we would have to ring them up in Mobi. So we were ringing everything up double. And then on top of that, if we were to open the store in order to maintain proper inventory and subscriptions, we would have to do that in front of people. And so we were closed longer than we really needed to be because we hadn't solved that puzzle yet.
And Django was, from the time Mobi stopped being supported, I think the gears had been turning in his head that we were going to need to do something eventually, mm-hmm. and this pandemic is a great opportunity for us to do that. I don't genuinely know what the scope of his vision at the beginning of the project was, but I knew immediately that if this works for us, we will be giving it to other people. Like Django is very generous at helping other people. I am somebody who, I love people and I give as much as I can to people, but I'm like, if we built this point of sale system, I would probably be like, all right, we use it in our store. That's fine. Like, I got a lot of other gears turning. I'm not trying to start another business. Yeah. I was able to see quickly, this is a whole thing, whether he realizes it or not. So, I was just trying to kind of yes and with it, because I think both of us try to not get in the way of the other person doing something that they believe in. And this was something that was necessary. We also believed in it. And yeah, when Django has a big vision, I think it's worth pursuing.
So I want to put a pin right there for just a minute and say, is there an example of that yes-anding someone else's passion, from either of you, that has led to a dry hole that you've then had to maybe tear up track for?
Its name was Moonbase. I think that's what Jeff's thinking of.
Yeah,
that's probably what I would go to. We opened a satellite store in another area of town.
Get it? Moon, satellite.
Yeah. Oh. Kind of like a richer, older sort of sub area of Bellingham. Mm-hmm. We had been approached by the landlord, really wanted us to move over there, have an open store. We got a really sick deal on the lease. But Django's wheels were turning, and I could see that. And that was pretty early in our working relationship. So mm-hmm. I hadn't gotten, the first time I cried at him was near the end of Moonbase, I remember. So, but it was the gears were turning. I didn't believe in it. In retrospect, I wish I had been more vocal about mm-hmm. that. But also, we were still learning our each other's language. I think the closest I got to it is okay, we're not finding any good reasons to not do this. Is there any good reason to do it? And that's kind of what I remember Django throughout the year that we had Moonbase, him kind of coming back to that statement of we didn't have a really good, it was more kind of like a question of can we?
Not should we?
It was a dry hole from resources perspective. It sucked bad because Like, it was mostly me behind the counter there. I didn't have a car, so I was biking across town every day. We had to hire like three new people to work in the main store to kind of cover the shifts that Moonbase was eating up. And, you know, when it was all over, we broke even. And for like a 1-year experiment in retail to break even, that's a win. That's not a failure.
True. Right.
But also, I was so glad to be done. I'm sure Jeff was even gladder that we were done. It was a rough time, and we learned a lot. We do back issues the way that we do them in our store because of our time at Moonbase. I got so bored that I figured out how to sell back issues sitting there alone, ringing up $400 days at best.
Yeah, we.
Hey, that's it seems like that's a leap from the 250 at the novelty store, right?
Right. Comics, right?
Rolling in it now.
People have to come in every week for comics. They only come in once a year at Christmas time for whoopee cushions.
I don't regret that year at all, though. Like, we learned a lot. And, you know, the brunt of the hardship did fall on Django because, like, he had kind of pushed for it, and he was therefore feeling responsible to physically be there. But I think that, like, we learned, like Django was saying, some important messages. Like, that was still relatively into our ownership together tenure. And I think that it spoke very highly to the importance of some ethereal things like community and personality within a store that is what drives the success of a store like ours, I think. And early on, I think we were kind of like looking at it very analytically of like, we could have multiple things, you know, split all this, but there's like a magical secret sauce, like you're saying, in all business ventures. You know, like, we've got 2 great record stores in town. I only go to one of them. I don't really know why, but I know I really like the people at that record store. Right. So like, there is an ethereal thing you can't put your finger on that drives people to be at certain places. So
that's all right. The thing you just said reminded me of the thing I wanted to say, but now that's 2 pins. Yeah. That's 2 pins. I'm going to put one on culture, and then we're going to go back because I think there's going to be another opportunity to get to culture. So, so you take some time. Everybody else is coming back from COVID. I actually remember this because I was, selling for a publisher at the time and trying to talk to people that, I knew were going to be friendly, and you guys weren't even open. I'm like, everybody else is open. What's going on? So I remember this time. So you decide to you're gonna slow come back in order to get this piece off of the ground.
This was like the final bit. We were pretty cautious. We were like one of the more cautious businesses in the area, and often throughout the pandemic, that caution turned out to be the thing that everybody was going to be doing in a week.
That's right. Yeah.
And so we just, like, the whole time we locked down real tight, didn't try to change rules to match whatever the rule of the week was, and just kind of stayed the course. And like, when it was time to reopen, we were starting to plan it, and then realized that there was just no way we could do it with ringing people up double. So I think I asked Jeff if we could get my shifts covered for 3 weeks so I could build a bridge. And 14 weeks later, we were ready to go.
Is this the largest coding project you've ever taken on?
Adam, this is the largest anything project I've ever taken on. I've never really thought more than a week ahead in my life.
Right.
Now I have, like, a 2-year plan, and it's all going to fall apart and change, but, like,
sure,
I can see far enough into the future that it's changed a lot of the way that I approach projects and people in my life, and just everything that I do has been changed by this project.
Yeah. Well, and are you the only coder involved? Is it all yours?
Wow. Yeah, I've hand coded everything. We were in such a hurry, and I was such a new developer that I didn't even have time to learn some frameworks that would have really helped from the beginning.
Sure.
I wish that we were using Laravel. We are not using Laravel. I reinvented big chunks of Laravel, thinking I was inventing something from scratch, but somebody has done all of the parts better.
Right.
for the infrastructure behind it.
There's one thing that tech does well, it's iterate, right? It just
totally.
Adam, I want to use this point to put a pin in things and give you your flowers, okay? because you mentioned a time. So I want to say two things. First of all, I probably started becoming a person that was willing to interact with people in the comic space because I was so shy. Comic space, like the final Comics Pro right before the pandemic or before the pandemic. I remember talking to you there. I was starting to come out of my own a little bit, but I remember the presentations. You had done 2 years of presentations on sort of like mental health and taking care of oneself. Those stood out to me very strongly as like, I think probably the first year I went to Comics Pro, that presentation was maybe my favorite thing that I took away from it. So that had made a really strong impression on me. But at the time where we were driving around and you were working for another publisher, I remember at different times we would maybe get frustrated with things happening at that publisher or whatever, and Django will be like, I got 7 hours of deliveries today, I'm just going to give Adam a call. And he would call you and you guys would talk for like 45 minutes while he was doing these deliveries, and that stood out to me very strongly as a statement of the importance of kind of the size and culture of the comic book industry, that people who are high up in a publisher making large-scale changes and innovating will care enough about to listen to a retailer for 45 minutes about a thing that is probably kind of similar to maybe a lot of things you've been hearing from other people over the last week or something. But shout out to you for being, willing. I think in comics as a whole is really great to be able to do that. The barrier between people is not very great, but it's really cool to have given us and Django that time at a very critical time to just like let people complain or whatever. That was very cool.
Well, I think that a lot of it is just hearing people. I think so much of what, if I've had any success in this industry, is just letting people be heard, right? I think that's an incredibly valuable tool that is, I've had to teach to others. But I can say that there's also a lot of value that comes to the publisher, right? That's that opportunity to hear how things are landing, right? Because you say things, you just cast these things out into the void, and you hope that they land. And if they don't land, like you've got to iterate. You've got to, you've got to kind of workshop them a little bit, because so much of this, I mean, comics is not run on data, right? It just isn't. Like, comic shops are finally starting to be run on data, but like everything else is, I mean, publishers are finally starting to be run on data, but like there are no like survey teams that are out talking to 1,000 retailers every week that coming back and telling you how this landed. Right.
Exactly.
And you very, very often you don't know how it landed until the day you get the initial orders in, and then you're like, well, I don't entirely know what that means, but I can get real specific.
Did they hate the color of the logo on this one?
What happened there?
I knew we didn't put the trade dress in the right place. But I will say that to the other piece, thank you for saying that, because those talks, I always felt like they were the things that I wish I had heard when I was a retailer, because it took me getting away from retail and even getting past like having a couple of different personal crises in my life before I started to really value my own health and my own mental well-being. Right. And that doesn't come naturally for most of us. So being able to have that conversation, but I just felt like you look out in that crowd and you're like, half of the people are just like staring at you. I'm talking about nature being in wave patterns and everybody.
That's how my brain goes all the time. No, that's like, I was impressed by how much overlap in terms of modality of thought there was going on there. So yeah,
yes,
good
well,
stuff.
Thank you. I'm so glad.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a good place. Then we're gonna put the pin in the narrative and to talk about culture for a minute, because I remembered why I brought up Brian. You guys have a wonderful podcast called Data Bros. That aside from selling apple juice, also you guys talk about the culture. I mean the data of comics. I will say that I feel like occasionally I listen to this and I go, I mean, you'll make statements about publishers should do X, Y, and Z, and I will actively argue with you, even though you cannot hear me, because you have no idea what publishers should be doing.
Totally.
You know what they see.
Totally.
So occasionally I just want to I'm getting on this show. This is
yeah. Oh, well, that's going to happen. That'll happen. That's going to happen. Yeah.
I don't care about your tight 30. It's going to take you But there is you've recently done an episode that I feel like is one of the things. If I had a goal for this show, it's to find people like you who I feel like are bringing something of value into our space, and to kind of tease that out of you so that others can use it to grow. Right. One of the episodes I wish I had done was the one that people should go and listen to right now. Is you two talking about how you hire and empower your staff. Right. I don't want to completely go over that because literally we're already at 55 minutes and I'm only halfway through my list of questions. And we haven't even really dug into why Comic Shop Assistant is awesome. But looking back on that episode, I'm sure you both have listened to it and thought about what you've said. Is there anything you missed talking about there? Because I thought it was just, it was wonderful. It's somebody who has led teams and has taught people how to think about and tried to empower them to grow. Like there was so many gems in that tight little 30. But was there more that you wanted to you didn't get a chance to talk about?
Man, I gotta say, Adam, I forget everything I say on a podcast as soon as I say it. So maybe not.
I do remember talking to Ashton a couple days after recording it and remembering there was something about Ashton I wanted to say, but I don't remember that now. But I will say that a lot of our approach to hiring and empowering employees has been assembled as a theory while we're doing it, kind of based on some of the wonderful people that have been attracted to our store that work with us. I don't think when we started it was like, here's how we do this stuff. We're very lucky to, there's just so many really genuinely good people in comics, and it's, right now is a very interesting time because no longer, if you're in your 25 or whatever and you read comics, are you somebody who went through a period of like social ostracization, right. Because it's popular enough now that you don't have to have gone through the trials to be comfortable with your identity about it. Mm-hmm. But even like 15 years ago, if you were an adult that liked comics, that means that you probably went through some willingness to be involved in a thing that was seen socially as, you're the lepers out there, and to be confidently want to be involved in that as an adult means that you are in a state of peace with your identity or interests that I respect. So again, we're working with a good pool of people to begin with.
Wonderful. That was wonderful. I do recommend that. We're going to put a link to it in the show notes because I do think it is one of those things. If you're ever building a manual for how to run a comic shop or even a business about that, I wonder actually. Now that you speak to it, I didn't finish that sentence there. It's going to really bother me when I read the transcript. But I wonder, how much of it is also the DNA of your store, which is this kind of like generational. People come in, they pick it up, they change things, they hand it off to the next. Like so much of that sounds to me like almost a wisdom of crowd in the inside of the shop, right?
I think that we are the first owners to really have employees with a capital E.
Yeah.
Until we moved into that downstairs area and Jeff and I started hanging out, it was a very small team. And that was part of the reason that they didn't need a point of sale, because Roman, who's worked there for 20 some years, could do it all in his head with or without a computer. Right. And so at some point we grew to a size where we needed more help and then more help and more help. And now we've got, 10 or 11 people working at the store. We'll probably add another one in the next year. And, so it's a totally different thing. So not to say, no, it's not an institutional thing. But I think we're the first people who've owned this store that have had this puzzle to solve.
Definitely.
That's wonderful. All right. So we're coming up on 1 hour and we haven't dug into what is Comic Shop Assistant. So
is this a tight hour? Is this a tight 60?
Tight 60?
I've well gone into 150, 190.
Excellent.
I don't think we're doing that tonight, but I'm perfectly willing to.
Beautiful.
All
My
right.
family's need for internet be damned. Okay. But all right. So let me paraphrase just what I think happened next, because like I said, I've been following this pretty closely because POS and data is really close to my heart. So I saw you guys come out of the pandemic. You started talking about this. You were saying this is something that we're doing. You come to Comics Pro. You're showing people what you're doing. I'm like, oh, thank God there's more people entering this space. Mm-hmm. I had just met Brian, who is just a gem of a person, and and the people coming at this from different places. places. I think it's wonderful that we're seeing this, and then the you guys team up together in this really strange way. But and then you're like, well, we're doing this. Yeah, we're going to bring people on. I don't know when. Maybe we'll start a beta. And then the next year, I think things are starting to cook. You're starting to feel it. I remember we had that dinner where we sat with you and Brian at that Mexican place, and we chatted about it there. And it was growing a little bit. And flash forward to today, I just did a few nights ago. I don't know how many weeks it's going to take before we put it out, but I just did an episode with Goblin Market, brand new shop in Chicago.
Yeah.
Dawn and River are, they're incredible people, and they have chosen to be one of your beta testers. How many beta testers are there now?
Well, we have 23 users. We're bringing in Golden Apple later this week, so we'll have 24.
Nice.
And we've got another 4 or 5 scheduled. At this point,
comfortably out of the beta stage.
Yeah, you could probably define it as beta if you wanted to, but we're just... I feel like the whole it's a full program that we're rolling out slow. The biggest beta part is the tech support from us. We're trying not to ruin our lives by taking on 10 stores at once and drowning and giving everybody poor service. Because there is a learning curve with anything, and we like to be very available for the first week or two. I don't work Mondays and Tuesdays at the shop so that I can answer the phone for anybody that needs anything on their first couple of days with Comic Shop Assistant. So
right. Well, that's wonderful. So how much, tell me, let's start with the bullet. What is Comic Shop Assistant? Here comes the pitch. I'll just sit quietly for a minute.
It's a web-based point of sale for comic and game stores. That's the easy pitch.
Right. What makes it different? It's web-based, right?
It's web-based, which is one, so you can do everything you need to do from anywhere.
It's been designed top to bottom since distribution was fractured, and I believe there is another point of sale system or an iteration of Managed Comics now that has been coming from that. But for the first big year and a half, I mean, we were the only ones that kind of the bones of it were created with this change in the industry having happened.
Right.
And, people who do the ordering for comics know what a wrinkle that added to the diamond system. So yeah, having it from its inception be multiple distribution and preferred distributors and everything, I think is a really important feature for it.
And it's been developed by me and Jeff, who don't approach things in the same way and know that other comic stores don't do things in the same way. So we worked really hard to make things as flexible as we possibly can so that, if you like to do things one way, you can do it that way, even though we think you're nuts for sorting by title and then customer instead of customer and then title. So there's a huge industry here, and nobody does any two things the same way. And we've played around with other point of sale systems, and even Moby was pretty rigid in the way that it required you to do things. And so we've done our best to hopefully find the place that the robot can help the human make the decision rather than force the human to do a thing a certain way.
That's interesting. So how much, so you have 25 stores. So you say you bring another 5 or so soon. My guess is that you're probably going to continue to see that, that growth level especially as you feel more and more empowered to bring them in and know what the answers are to their questions. Mm-hmm. That's going to come, as you said, every store is just kind of its own unique fingerprint of the people who run it and the community around it, and each one is run a slightly different way. We can't even decide if it's called a subscription or a pull box, right?
Exactly.
We can't. Right? So as you are going along, how do you avoid driving to the lowest common denominator as far as workflow or even data maintenance, right? How do you avoid keeping it from breaking because you're doing it the way someone else wants to do it?
So the lowest common denominator doesn't even want a point of sale system, first of all.
Okay.
So they're not interacting with it at all. We do have, because the data on Comic Shop Assistant is hosted on your own iteration of a server, you're in charge of bringing it in, vetting it, and using it. As opposed to some systems which will have, cleaned data that you wait for them to send down to you. So what we do is we just say, look, this is the best way to do it. If you follow these steps every month, then you're going to have pretty clean data and it's going to work. If you want, you can mess with it. You can assign an annual the same series code as the main series, and it's not going to break everything, but it's going to give you bad reporting. You can, it's flexible enough that it doesn't generally break unless you try really hard with a concerted effort to break it.
In terms of that, like, kind of lowest common denominator, or, trying to make it not necessarily appeal to a certain type of way of doing things, I think that what's been really important throughout the entire thing for Django and I is, I guess we refer to it often as, like, we try to be as granular and precise with the amount of data and the way that it's represented and how versatile it can be, to the point where, like, if we are really granular with that, we don't have to tell you exactly how to do things, because you can then build and use those pieces however you want. So it's like, if you have a whole bunch of Legos that are a 1x1 piece, as long as you have 1,000,000 of those, you could build any building or shape that you want. But if you have a whole bunch of, like, 4x2s and thick ones, 2x1s, you're constrained a little bit in terms of the amount of nuance there.
I'm pretty sure, Jeff, if you had all 1x1s, they would just make, several straight columns.
You're right. You're absolutely right. Yeah, you're right. That could only be that. Well, that metaphor I was coming up with on the spot, it really fell flat on its face. But
let's iterate this.
The term I wanted was axiom, which is the smallest unit of truth that is known to be.
So. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, all right. So, what makes it special, other than, it's let's go back then, because it sounds to me like each store is getting their own data. Is that siloed within the store? Are you seeing large data? Are you seeing an aggregate?
We haven't built the tools for us to make reports on multiple store levels, but that's on the roadmap, where we can look at everything at once, and we'll have some publisher tools and some distributor tools at some point. But right now, like with everything about this, our whole goal was to build the best behind-the-counter tool that we could. And so we want this behind-the-counter tool to be rock solid before we even start entertaining anything else. We're just now at the point where we're about to release customer-facing tools so that our customers can look at their polls, they can subscribe, unsubscribe, special order, do all that. But we had to have our employees figure out every possible way you could screw that up, so that we can put the rails in for our customers who are going to find new ways to throw a wrench in the plans, right?
Right.
So, making sure that this back end is as perfect and solid as it can be before we start aggregating the data and, using some of those larger models. Or, we have a vision of stores having an infinite back room, where if you're using the back issue module in Comic Shop Assistant, you can say anything I've had for more than 6 months is half off to stores in the network. And then, my customer never needs to know that your customer or your store is where I'm getting that comic, right?
Right.
So, there's having super granular data and having good stores able to manage their inventory and their products well and their sales well means that whatever direction we want to grow in, we'll be able to have the information that we need to do that.
I kind of love that. The idea that it's not designed to be everything to everyone. It's designed to be the thing for one, and then you can add something on top of that. And leaving that door open, but not necessarily like, building it with doors to begin with. I think that's really smart. That's would you say, have you hired anyone for the store who is you think, wow, this guy's really dumb? He's going to break our POS system.
He's going to make our system better.
Yeah, that's right. He's so dumb that we got to put him behind the counter today.
Well, it took needing a really bad bowler before you learned to innovate gutters to make sure the balls didn't go in there, right? So, it's learning. It's everything's a positive.
That's when we
first rolled it out. I sat in the store and watched everybody interact with it. So I watched we had 6 or 7 people behind the counter at that point. And so I would just watch them and see one guy clicked on a column instead of a title to link to the thing. So I was like, okay, I guess we need to make those columns clickable. And now those columns are clickable. So just like however people were interacting with it, we don't want to see you try to figure out how to do it. We want to see you just do it. And wherever we can streamline it and make it easy to use, you can save time. We were doing Tuesdays before we built this. Tuesday was taking us, me and Jeff, from 10 a.m. until 6 or 7. And now I stay home on Tuesdays and Jeff is out of there by noon or 1.
Yeah, by about 1. We passed off the polling act to one of our employees, but I do all the counting and check in and everything in just a couple of hours. So, to take a 2-person whole day task, taking all these invoices in and books and streamlining it to a 1-person thing that you can go get lunch by the end of is pretty
That's
incredible.
Remarkable. Yeah. I mean, it has been obvious that is the thing that is the one service that retailers specifically need is how to manage the varying different sources and the varying different receiving. Is it, once you learn that system, do you have to adjust to whatever how much adjustments are you making between a shipment from PRH versus a shipment from Lunar versus, or ordering from this place? Is it ordering process the same? Is the receiving process the same? How much...
act of it in terms of how you're using the system to do all of it feels intuitively the same. Like placing an order, like an FOC or an initial through Penguin or Lunar or Diamond or whatever, the interface is the same. It feels exactly the same. Checking it in as well. The invoice system is very easy. It's everything kind of follows the same pattern, but you can combine those different things like the check-in process to allow you to do that. But kind of to your point, like there, in terms of iteration or like modifications within that, there isn't a singular right way to do it. Sort of like Django said, like we, lay all of our books out alphabetically and count them and then scan every one and then output polls by customer with an alphabetical list of their comics within there. The system is designed to be able to work if people wanted to check in those invoices separately and then, print out Amazing Spider-Man and pull every customer that gets Amazing Spider-Man and put it away for them rather than, customers' items. It's the act of itself seems very homogenous. The process you're doing is the same for those, but there's a lot of ability to variate within there.
That's wonderful. I've often said that the reason that there's never been a Barnes & Noble or a Borders for comics, and therefore has never been an Amazon for comics, is because there's never been one way to do comics.
Right.
We've got, and we have this incredibly stable number of stores that has not changed plus or minus 4% in something like 15, 16 years.
I don't know if that's good.
Well,
should have gone up in that time.
Yeah, but the fact that it hasn't gone way down.
I was about to say, how many record stores, man?
Yeah.
How many bookstores?
Right,
how many independent bookstores? We're not talking about a great time for brick and mortar retail.
Yeah.
Growing and staying.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the idea of being able to make it adjustable, I think, is really smart and a great way to future-proof yourself, for the system.
Let's say future resistance ourselves.
Sure.
Nothing in comics is anything proof, Adam.
No.
I mean, I think, to your point there, and just sort of the sales pitch of CSA as a whole, but also in listening to your presentations and stuff, there's especially like, the psychedelic world or Eastern meditation and philosophy. I think the more I ingratiate myself in those types of thinking, the more I am aware of the fact that there is no genuinely right way to do anything. There's 7 or 8 billion people on the planet, and every single one of them is living a truth in their own mind. So CSA doesn't approach things like this is the best way to do it. I mean, we think there's best ways to do stuff, but in its DNA, it is, conceived to be able to reflect everyone's truth because no one's wrong for doing their thing their way.
I think a good example of that, and I don't know if any of our users really know this, but when we print out pull sheets, the font is sized so that Jeff's carpal tunnel wrist doesn't hurt when he's pulling books. Right, so it's
like the right lift of the number of books in a page.
Comics.
Yeah.
So like somebody with younger wrists doesn't need that, and they might wish that they had more to hold, and that they were printing out less pieces of paper, right? So like their right way is totally different from Jeff's right way.
I love that this is it's like NASA. The size of the rockets began because of the size of the axles on Roman chariots. You know, all of this goes back to Jeff's carpal tunnel.
I mean, Jeff, yeah.
Someday the entire industry we're going to be like, why do we do it this way? Well, there's this guy, Jeff.
Jeff's got bad wrists.
He played a lot of guitars. I don't know what to tell you, man.
Why does a lift 15 to 18 comic books?
Is there anything that we haven't covered tonight? If somebody said, they're now, you're one of, let's call it 4, right? Let's call it 4 major POS systems in an incredibly tight market. We're not talking about, maybe... my company does this every year. We do a Google search for stores, and we just rip out everybody who on Google Maps says that they're a comic shop. Mm-hmm. And and every year it doesn't really change all that much. Seemingly around 4,800 stores worldwide, right?
Okay.
Not a huge market, right?
Sure.
4 competitors trying to divvy up this huge market. Not a huge market. What is it that makes yours number 1?
Ooh, Django, sales pitch us.
Let's
I don't know that we need to be number 1, but I think that if we wanted to be number 1, and I had to make a sales pitch for it, I think it would be just that it saves you a lot of time and lets you do it the way that you want to do it. You know, kind of like the have it your way sort of that Burger King thing.
Yeah.
We experimented with other POS systems, like Django had said, but one of the things that we ran into outside of Moby was that there was the feeling of a right or wrong way to do things, or you had to do things a certain way. And I think that people that run and own comic stores, we do it for a lot of reasons, but a thing that I think a lot of us have in common is we don't like feeling like there's a certain way we have to do things, and we're adhering to that code of doing things. Like, I would work at a very successful business somewhere, if that was what I was down with.
Right. Yeah, I was about to say, what it takes to be successful in comics, you're smart enough and creative enough and hardworking enough that you can make a lot more money elsewhere, except you don't want to be told.
Exactly.
Yeah. Don't you tell me. You're not my father.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's where I would start the pitch for selling to every single one of those comic stores. But also, it is a cramped market, and I don't think that people who use Comic Shop Assistant are necessarily a good fit for one of the other ones. And I don't think that somebody who uses Managed Comics is necessarily a good fit for Comic Shop Assistant. I think of the 4, I think 3 of them are very strong, use cases for a specific personality type. Somebody who needs what we prioritize should be using our system, and that's not necessarily what Managed Comics or Comics Hub prioritizes, right? So it's, we can, I think that there's room for those 3. I think if Comic Suite wants to stay in the game, they need to invest a little bit more in development and maintenance, but
it's hard to do when you give it away.
Yeah. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with people who want to stick with whatever they have now, even if that's nothing, right? I think Jeff and I would agree that we don't want somebody using our system under duress. If you don't want to point a sale, please don't talk to us. You're doing fine.
And if I needed to get a new POS system for a store that wasn't associated with the comics place or whatever, the thing that would govern my decision would be the people that are running it and the way that they approach running it. I would get on board with learning the procedural aspect of whatever one that I seem to see eye to eye or respect the approach of the creators, So I think that that's one aspect that I'm just really proud of this whole thing with Django and I is I think that it's been executed with a tremendous amount of respect for the potential users. And yeah, I think that Django and I just genuinely like each other and like doing all this stuff. And if I weren't
like comic stores,
if I weren't part of this bromance, I would want to be a part of that bromance.
You think Moonbase would have lasted longer if it had had CSA?
Absolutely not. It was not the POS that brought Moonbase down.
Yeah.
It was exhaustion.
You are
Bus
you are
rides.
such a like Pacific Northwest businessman. I give you this like big fat juicy one right over the plate. You're like, nah, man, no way.
No.
I mean, what? All right, then in that case, would you say that now that you have this, like if you both adopted a comic shop, would you be more confident in opening a new location with this sort of tool?
Totally.
100% yes, that.
Yeah.
Well, Django and I were in New Orleans a couple months ago, and I got an email from the person who owns the local mall, and they were trying to get us to open a satellite location in the mall. And we were like, well, that's a bad idea. But what would be why should we do it? While we were just driving, we spent like an hour and a half talking about all of it. One of the big reasons to do it would be like, oh yeah, we could really dial in like the multi-store procedure of CSA by using that. But the CSA protocol for all of it makes approaching that problem way easier than when we did Moonbase, 100%.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. Also, I love that there's another hippie Pacific Northwest thing. You calling it a CSA, right? Like a farm share. I think it's really funnier
but don't
than
go
it
too
should
far
be.
south, or it turns into the Confederate States of America. And don't watch any crime shows. I'm not even going to say that one out loud.
CSA is a pretty common acronym, as it turns out. And it's
you just learned about my privilege.
Yeah.
I thought about it being farm shares.
yeah.
Yankee.
Yeah, that's really funny. All right, is there any? I don't want to leave you guys. If there's anything else that we can talk about that you think would pitch, get somebody who's on the fence to come and talk to you guys about it.
I mean, our favorite thing to do is just kind of show it to people. We do walkthroughs a few times a month, and I think that within that, people can decide if it's something that should be on the plate for them. We're happy to give a couple hours to show off what we've got going, and I don't think there's a lot of people who have watched what we show them who haven't signed up to get on the wait list or signed up to get in immediately. So
That's it says a lot about both your system and your pitch. I think they should.
It's a really weird, slow roll, Adam. And part of what we have that's an advantage is that it really is just us doing this. So we don't have a team of people that need to get paid. So we'll be hopefully around 50 stores by the end of the year, and that's decent pay for us, and we can start looking at hiring people. But in my long history of running businesses, I've always tried to do things within my means and grow them very slowly and organically. And I think it looks absolutely counterintuitive from the outside when you see what we're doing here, but it's kind of the way that we're both comfortable with it.
I mean, the necessity was using it in our own store. So I think one of the things we're lucky for is that there isn't an impetus that's forcing us to need to get users in as soon as possible. Because I think Django and I both take the responsibility of creating something that people are using very, very seriously. Both of us don't like over-promising and under-delivering. So having had the freedom to stress test everything in our store and have it be coded by somebody who runs a shop, and most of the conversations we have are like math proof discussions about Django could like variable X be found in this way to cross-reference this. Like, I don't understand how he's able to take a lot of my words and put them in a coding way, but yeah. So we're lucky to slowly do it.
How you two work. Talk to me about a basic week. So, I mean, this is just my understanding of what you two have on your plate. You're running a comics place, right? Is a store big enough for 6 employees, I think you said?
9 or 10.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're talking, it's a sizable shop. I don't want to ask revenue, but I could probably guess. You've got your own POS system that you're now, got 25 stores, looking at 50 by the end of the year. You've got 2 podcasts that I know of, and apparently Jeff does a bunch of stuff on the side. What does your week look like? How do you break that up? How does the responsibilities break down?
Oh gosh.
Right
Does it
now,
change?
since
Changes
CSA has
daily.
been a big thing, we intentionally kind of took some of Django's in-store shifts away. Like I do Tuesdays solo now, and not have him there for being able to help users of CSA. I think that in general, Django is more focused on CSA by necessity, and then I try to pick up that slack and by trying to focus on the comic shop and our employees there, and it all kind of comes out in the wash. But in terms of our schedule, I mean, we record 2 podcasts a week together. Our phones would show that we talk to each other far more than our wives and partners.
Yep.
We have a weekly Wednesday
meeting.
We're always, I mean, I feel like seldom go days where we don't see each other.
I have 2 store shifts, right? So one on Wednesday morning, because Wednesday is the greatest day of the year in comic stores. Jeff and I both work that. And then I also work Sundays. And, I think no matter how busy or successful comic shop assistant gets, it's important for both of us to have a foot in the comic store, because that's where you find workflow problems that could be smoothed out with software.
Yeah.
I'm generally like up at 8 a.m. answering emails and phone calls and coding sometimes until midnight or 2. It's I take a nap in there. I ate a big cheese sandwich at some point.
Either of you had kids? Your families?
I have 3
Django's
kids.
got a slew, yeah.
My youngest is 21, so they don't need day-to-day maintenance.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And I got married back in September, and Django was one of my groomsmen. So,
congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll start pooping those things out soon, I think.
And you're doing it in order, right? Like marriage, house, kids.
Yes. Django has approached that in a very different order than me.
I don't know anything about who plans these kinds of things.
Your American flag shirt, Jeff.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
As someone who has a 9-year-old and a 21-year-old in the same apartment, I can tell you,
dude,
I approach this completely differently than planned.
Yeah.
No, I totally understand. All right, well, cool. Hold on a second here. All right, well, I want to take a moment just to talk about this. Is something I've been asking everybody, and it's something I find really interesting.
Yeah.
We know each other mostly because we started online, right? I came up in retail during a time when retailers were starting to talk to each other in forums and Facebook groups and that kind of thing. I have since, looking back on that time, have wondered how strong my store would have been had I not spent as much time, being so obsessed with someone being wrong on the internet. My question really is kind of broad, but because I've been asking it a few different people. What do you feel like that kind of conversation, that sort of ongoing push, that ongoing conflict, or that ongoing venting, as it were? Do you feel like it's a net positive or a net negative, both for you as an individuals and for for our industry as a whole?
You mean retailers or
the retailer culture
fans?
I'm not talking about fans. Fans should be talking. We want engagement. We want them talking. But I don't have an answer for this. That's why I keep bringing it up, because I find it to be a really fascinating conundrum, because I got drawn like a moth to the flame to all of the conversation. And I look back on that time and I wonder what my business would have looked like had I not. Right.
I think there is perhaps an unfortunate amount of identity that people develop by feeling wronged or being upset. And not even necessarily just an identity, but a sense of camaraderie that can come with, like, hey, you hate that thing? I hate that thing too. I think that it's it's kind of lower common denominator type of thing. It's a thing that all people have in common. So it's not necessarily a type of identity or thing that I'm like, oh, wow, you're a really unique person. I think that in any shared space, you run the risk of letting negativity become the thing that you have in common, or the things that frustrate you, you start forming a sense of identity around. I think that is true for most mediums and spaces. I definitely am less present on the internet than Django. I'm just trying to get back into it. A part of my hesitance was sort of the amount of like negativity, especially because like going back to, Django being able to call you on the road. I think comics have a really wonderful amount of respect between all the parties involved, and people in a position to complain to make themselves available for you to do that. So I feel like if something bothers me and like Adam is doing it, I should reach out to Adam. I don't necessarily love publicly shouting out a person to talk about a problem that I have. That said, there's a lot of people who are shy or not willing to reach out personally or be vulnerable about a thing that's happening to them. So they can address it in a different way, and that can still have a positive outcome. Or, maybe you could say specifically that maybe you didn't realize certain problems existed until you had 15 people shouting at you about that problem online. Surely there is a good side of it as well, but I do have sort of that firm, just sort of actively trying to make the world a better place around me by being positive and framing things in a positive way. So I sort of have a lot of opinions about the internet and sort of complaining and stuff, but I think it goes back to just sort of a particularly American sense of identity that comes with finding our anger and resentment to be a thing that we source an identity around.
I think it's an interesting point. Ahead. Like this idea of, it does reach out to that sort of base part of us that wants to identify, that was looking so much for connection and identity, that the minute we see somebody who has the same negative feeling that we maybe are feeling some, not shame over, but like it's not, that negativity can feel like a personal problem.
Yeah.
And the minute somebody else has it, well, now it's not my personal problem. It's their problem.
Yeah.
Right? So let's go make it their problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting.
I think a lot of the online discussions from retailers are done from their perspective without having a lot of other retailer or publisher or distributor perspectives in mind when they talk about it. So like when you mentioned that on Data Bros, we're like, what publishers ought to do. The way that I would try to say that is, if publishers did this, then we could do that. Right. So like I fail at that. I think other people fail at that. I think that, like there's this ongoing conversation of you need to put your title at the top of the comic. And they're not wrong for their store. Right. But for other stores that don't do that, that's like, who cares? I can show the whole cover. And so like, I think you need to do is not very productive. Whereas if you did this, I could do that. Is a lot more productive. And just kind of figuring out like the thing I try to think of every time I get ready to go shout about something on the internet is this a problem because of something I'm doing, or because of something a publisher's doing, or because of something a distributor's doing? Because it's probably one of those three. And if it's something that is isolated, or not isolated, but if it's something that is a solvable problem at my level, maybe I should solve it instead of griping to you. And if I can't, then I have to decide like who do I approach first with a complaint.
It's interesting. The word "should" is such a it's such a
loaded.
It's so loaded, right?
Yeah.
They should do this, right? Yeah. It's such it's just full of meaning and kind of can be vitriol.
Absolutely.
There's some retailers that in my mind, when I read their thing, I have to remember to preface it with "in my store." Yeah. And then I read it and I'm like, oh, I don't think you're a giant jerk, but you're coming across like the way you're coming across is pretty rude.
Yeah.
And what you meant to say isn't rude. You're just forgetting to include that this is just isolated to you, and your life could be made easier.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think they're definitely being honest about, the world that they see. Mm-hmm. It's just a matter of, how big is their worldview and how big is the scope of this problem. I find that really interesting. So this actually goes to a number of things. One of the reasons that I started this company was I called it Prana Direct Market Solutions, because A, I love yoga and Sanskrit, and B, I love the direct market. I love comic shops. There's something about like this oasis of acceptance that you were talking about, Jeff, earlier, that just feels right. Which, by the way, how crazy is it that this week that Coca-Cola put out a ad with the Marvel superheroes in a comic book shop? My mind is my like 20-year-old me is just like, what is going on?
And I think about marketing all the time, and like that commercial felt to me much more like commercials from the 90s and early 2000s, whereas like so much marketing goes towards sort of like absurdist or music as a focus or something. That reminded me of like the days where like, you know, because when I'm going to bed, sometimes I watch, you know, hour and a half commercial compilations from the early 90s and stuff. So, like, yeah, I love tracking the different ways things have been marketed over the decades. And, yeah, that is a unique little bit of thing that came out.
Yeah. So, anyway, I think about all of these things because I want to try and create tools much in the same way that you did, right? I want to create tools that will make a stronger direct market, it would make a stronger industry, you know, because I am feeding my kids with this industry. Mm-hmm. And I've spent my entire adult life, 3 decades in this industry. So I want to make sure that, it's working. So to that end, like you guys saw a problem and you solved it for yourselves and you thought, this is strong enough, I'm going to take it to others. Are there any problems that you see that you're like, this should be easier? Someone who is not me, I have skill in coding. I want to do that. I'm, a psych major who loves marketing. I can talk about that shit. Right. But there's somebody else who had other skills. What we need is, has there been anything like that recently?
I mean, one thing, this is very sideways, but one thing that Jeff and I were talking about that we thought would be kind of cool is like staff sharing. So we go on these long road trips and stop at a bunch of stores, and we're always inspired either because somebody's doing something great or because they're doing something that looks like a terrible idea to us. But either way, it's like, oh, this is awesome. Let's ape it, or let's remember to never do it that way, right?
Yeah.
And I think that like if there was a way to take a mid or a high level employee and swap them for 2 weeks from store to store, like I think that would be an amazing thing for stores. I've got no idea. Like, I don't think that answers your question at all, but it's
that's incredible. That's perfect. Actually, that's exactly
we were trying to talk about the practicality of like, okay, so then what resources are required for that? Like housing, food. Okay, so then which business is responsible for which out? But like, yeah, I mean, I think sort of part of the germ for that idea is, do you remember the Comics Pro where Philip auctioned off Morgan to go to a store? It's like, just what an awesome experience. And then as we've been working with CSA, if we could get somebody who really knows CSA in the store with people to help them figure it out, but also learn about how their store works.
What's interesting to me about that is Anthony Militano is my right-hand man in Prana.
Yeah.
You guys have met Anthony. He's worked with me at Bad Idea, but he works with me in Prana. But he and I met when I was working for Stu at Comic Hub, and he at the time was managing the Maximum comic shops in Vegas, right? And they wanted to bring in Comic Hub, and he said, "But I wanted to make sure that I know what it is." So he said, "Is there a retailer I can go and spend a couple days just working with it?"
Mm-hmm.
And so he and I both met in Arizona, in Phoenix, and the two of us worked at Samurai for 2 days.
Oh, nice.
And that experience, I mean, it taught us, I see you, you see me, we're going to work together. Right. But beyond that, like just getting to know how those shops worked, and getting a good feeling for that, especially coming from where we both did, which was we understand the basic mechanics of how this does, so we can see the distinctions.
Right.
I think that's really interesting.
I think there's like a lot of the people you've interviewed that I've listened to so far, and in other interviews started in comic stores, right? Including you.
Including me, yeah.
But how long has it been and how different is it now? Right. So like some of that knowledge carries over, but a big chunk of it just doesn't quite, fracturing the distribution meant that now instead of checking in on 1 day, you might be checking in on 3 or 4 or 5 days. And that changes the entire equation for staffing and for planning anything at all. And so like when Image was talking about going to the DC Tuesday release schedule and the different FOC, like I think that one of the things that got through and made sense to them was no, this sucks because of the staffing thing. It's not all the other things that
resistance to change
some people are shouting about. It's
Yeah.
the staffing thing is expensive and confusing and hard on us. And that's not something that, you can necessarily pinpoint unless you're a retailer who's really in touch with exactly what's making you mad about a thing, which is not everybody. And it's not the kind of thing that you would know even if you had worked in a comic store 15 years ago.
Right. Yeah, no, I can definitely see that. And but it's inevitable, right? You're going to have to, these businesses are going to have to make the decisions that are based on their best interests. Right. And at some point, that's going to conflict with someone's best interest because it's such a diverse group, you know?
Yeah.
There's no way around that.
I mean, I always assume that publishers and distributors are working with information we don't even have the questions to ask about.
Yeah.
Right. So like I also,
that's
you're
a very
all humans.
Mature assumption on your part, by the way. Thank you for making that.
Yeah, you've got some of that stuff. I think also, we're all humans in what's really a small industry, and sometimes a little decision that one person makes without being able to game it through all the way can have long-term effects.
It's true. It's true. Much like Jeff's carpal tunnel.
Yeah.
All right. I have two more questions, and we can wrap up. They're both kind of general. Mm-hmm. One, I want to hear from both of you. If hearing a lot about we all know a lot about comics and the comics industry and how this works. If either one of you had to give a TED talk about something that was not something you get paid for right now. Something you know so well that it'd be worthwhile you giving like a 10 to 15 minute speech. What would that be?
I mean, I could be very loose with the kind of reins of what I consider what I get paid for, but I think, positive working relationships or, essentially trying to get to that space in between that exists between two people in any given situation. And, the vulnerability that comes with being willing to put yourself in that position, and then also the vulnerability required to hear somebody else coming into that position. And just, I believe we're all made better and stronger by being able to absorb and understand the world from multiple viewpoints. So I think that is something we take for granted, and it could level up your game and whatever you're doing with sort of the right encouragement and ways of thinking about approaching that type of thinking rather than where we're coming from generally.
I'm here for it. I'm ready to listen. I'm ready to listen, take notes.
I got nothing, man. Like the closest I can think of, because every minute of my day is basically something that I'm ostensibly getting paid for at this point.
Sure.
But
you can't give me 15 minutes on the beauty of the Indiana Jones movies. Like you don't.
Yeah, I mean, I could give you the history of the Shadow. Probably
dude,
from
Django
memory,
would do a 15-minute TED talk on efficiency or the ways to maximize output by slight rearrangement in your daily life. Like
all things I get paid for. I think
exactly,
probably what I would like to.
I gotta work out that question, man, because I don't want to limit you.
Oh, then I changed mine to bass playing.
I think that one thing that I've managed to do in my life, especially in the last 10 years or so, is arrange it so that I don't do anything that I don't want to do. Yeah. And I think I could probably talk for 10 or 15 minutes about some of the techniques that I've come up with for that, and some of the boundaries that I was able to set early on, and some of the habits that I have to make sure that, I enjoy everything I do. I work an ungodly amount, and I never feel like I'm working. I feel like I'm doing tasks and completing exciting projects. And I think that, figuring out that enough is good enough, and, not doing something that you don't want to do is one of the most important things in my life. And I could probably talk about that for 10 minutes on a TED Talk.
I'd listen. I'm here for it. All right, one last question, and I think this one is going to be for Jeff.
Oh, damn it, I forgot my bear.
Oh, shit!
Just a second, Adam, don't move.
All right. Oh, this is such a... Oh, we get a good look at Jeff's closet. This is spectacular.
It's pretty good.
God, the color. Yeah. All right.
Hello, Adam.
Oh, Bear!
Oh,
What's
hi,
up,
buddy. It's good to see you, old man. We've got really similar facial hair, you and I.
We do. I think you look really great with that. By the way, I think I like how you keep it nice and trim. That's really good.
Thank you.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. No problem.
All right, buddy. All right, Jeff or Bear. When was the last time one of the two of you cried, and what was it about?
That's such a good question. I'll tell you what. With this, the psychology degree, the parent psychologist, I was raised to believe crying is a positive thing. I love engaging in art that makes me feel real bad or sad. I mean, I think the line that exists between sadness and beauty is very, very fine and tenuous. Let's see. I'll tell you what, though, Adam. 2.5 years ago, started taking medicine for depressants. Very positive. Much harder to cry now. In a world where I don't have baggage about crying, it becomes more difficult to cry. When was the last time I cried?
Has that been a positive? So it's been a positive experience for you that medication?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think medication, antidepressants, anxiety meds, always particularly effective if you're taking them in tandem with talk therapy. Don't rely specifically on a medication for it, but I've been doing both of those for a very long time. Well, the therapy for a long time.
It's improved my life as well.
Yeah.
I think there's a book called it's called Lost Connections. Do you know this book that I'm talking about? It's talking about the I'll you know what? I'll put it in the show notes and I'll send it to you.
Yeah, I'm writing it down
It's
here.
a book talking about the rise of antidepressants and how it can really be anti-anxiety and antidepressants, how it can be correlated to our loss of personal connections and our loss of community in our lives. And that many times what we don't need is another compound. It's connection. Yeah. So I'm curious to, if and when you read it, I'm curious to have a conversation about it.
Yeah, I'd love to. That sort of stuff is my favorite thing. But yeah, I cried I know I cried a month and a half ago when Django and I had our argument. Yeah, that's probably the last time I know I cried. Yeah.
You said 6 weeks ago earlier, and I thought that was pointed, and now you said a month and a half ago. It really was.
Yeah.
Can you say what it was? Can you give me a general point? I'm just curious.
It was a miscommunication between two people at a time where they were both stressed and tired, and a statement could have been made more delicately. And if I had known the position Django was in at the time and the way that it would have been construed, I would certainly have not said it or addressed it very differently. But it's and it wasn't even that shocking. It's just we have such a high level of respect and expectation for the respect that we treat each other with, that there was a moment where the machines weren't working correctly, and a thing got in there that made it easy to be offended by and lash out. And also lashing out and being offended by is a thing that we generally work really hard to not have happen. So for us to be in that spot is indicative of a lot of other circumstantial things around it. Yeah. But I'm very sensitive to Django and I, and our working relationship is, as important as my relationship with my wife. I shouldn't say that, but I place it at that level of importance. I've been with Django longer than my wife. So when that machine, the prospect of that machine not working like it's supposed to really bums me out, and then I can do some catastrophizing and stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
It was brief but bad.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to end on a downer. As we were talking, I realized that for you specifically, it feels like those emotional moments tend to be the touchstones of a narrative, right?
Yeah,
they are the narrative beats for you in your relationship and in your progress as in your career. I think that's a really. I don't know. I don't want to overanalyze you, but
anytime.
I thought it was really interesting.
Anytime. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Yeah.
This has been wonderful. I could not have gone better. I hope that you guys had a good time, because I definitely did.
Man.
Adam, thank you.
Where can people find you? What would you like them to, when they follow up with these two remarkable humans, where did they get to know more about what you do and what you want to say?
Well, geez, they can find our comic store at thecomicsplace.com. They can find us on the internet. Somehow we're the only comics place named Comic Store, which
Terrible
not
name,
my favorite name, but
Yeah.
it serves
If
its
it's yours.
purpose.
Yeah.
And then Comic Shop Assistant is on Facebook and comicshopassistant.com. Those are probably the two easiest ways to get a hold of us.
Yeah.
And then personally, I'm on Facebook, also on TikTok. Oh, you can find us on Data Bros.
Yeah.
My
Yes.
TikTok is pretty good TikTok videos, and it's got nothing to do with anything we talked about today, but you might appreciate it, Adam.
All right. I'll look it up.
You can. I'm not super on the internet a ton, except for podcast forms. You can find me and Django on our Perfectly Acceptable podcast, also a music podcast called Why Not Like It. And my personal thing I'm most proud of having probably made in the last handful of years is a podcast called Batman in Quarantine that Django and I did during the pandemic, where we did a issue-by-issue read-through of Grant Morrison's whole in-depth Batman run. And that ended up being a crazy time commitment, but during the pandemic, it found a really cool community that we brought a whole bunch of people on board for. And so that's a cool thing to, if you're interested in Jeff, I would go find that out. Yeah.
Back in the aughts, Car D'Angelo of Earth 2 and I did a read through of Watchmen issue by issue that we did just as it would have been a podcast if we were doing it now, but at the time it was just these web pages of us. I talk and then he talks and then a guest talks, and it was just
That's
all
awesome.
It was so much fun.
Yeah,
I can only imagine. All right, boys. Hi again. Thanks so much for watching Comic Industry Insiders. It, as always, is our pleasure to talk to the movers and shakers of comics and to bring you those conversations. We'd love it if you'd support us with a like and subscribe, and telling your friends is always good, but really what we'd want to do is hear from you. Any questions, any suggestions you have about our show, any suggested guests, frankly, anything at all, we'd love to hear from you. Our producer is nearly always Stephanie Gerk, and our researcher is Anthony Militano, who makes me look much smarter than I am. All right, guys. Thanks so much. Namaste, y'all.